Today we'll be tying a Pat's rubber leg nymph. The materials that you will need to tie this fly are as follows. Begin with lead wire already wrapped around the shank of the hook. Use a jam knot to start your thread behind the lead wire. Once the thread is gripped to the hook, begin to work your thread in between the wraps of the lead wire towards the front. Create a thread dam at the front of the wire and then work your way back several times forward and back, creating layers. This will help anchor the lead in place and also create a good base so that when you tie materials over the top, they won't slide around the hook. For our tail, we're going to use a 2 to 3 inch strand of brown flex floss. A simple way to tie this in is to wrap the flex floss around the thread. Stretching the flex floss a little to create some tension makes positioning the tail very simple. Once you have the tail in the position that you want, take several wraps to anchor it in place. Fold the pieces back and cover them with thread until your bobbin is about even with the barb of the hook. Move your thread up to the front of the hook and we are going to repeat these same steps to put in the antenna for the fly. You may have noticed that both of these pieces are longer than what they are on a finished fly. This is done on purpose. We will trim everything up when we are completely done, and in fact we will do the same thing with the legs when we tie those in. Next we are going to tie in a piece of tan chenille for the belly. This is tied in on bottom, and if you have a rotary vise, it is easier to flip the fly upside down for this next step. We are tying with the rotary vise here, and we will turn this fly upside down. When tying in chenille, it is important to strip a small piece at the end so that you're tying in with the core. Place the chenille on the bottom of the fly, give it a couple wraps to secure it in place, then wrap back to about where we strip the fibers off of the chenille. Once the material is tied in securely, turn your fly back over. We are then going to take the main piece of chenille, in this case coffee and black, and we are going to tie it in the same way but on top of the hook. Wrap back until you finish at the same part where you did with the tan chenille. Then move your bobbin up to just past the halfway point on the fly. Start the body by taking the variegated piece of chenille and take one wrap around the hook. This first wrap should go behind the tail. This will help split the tail like on a real stonefly. The next 2 wraps are going to go behind the tan chenille but on top of the tail. Then after you've put those 2 wraps in, move the tan chenille back and put it out of the way for a second and take 3 to 5 wraps with the variegated chenille until you reach about the halfway point on the hook. Once you reach the halfway point on the fly with the chenille, take the thread and give 2 or 3 turns to help hold the chenille in place so it doesn't unravel while we do the next few steps. This next part is easier if you're able to turn the fly so the belly is facing you. If not, it can still be done, but you're going to have to look underneath the fly to do it. You're going to take the tan chenille and pull it straight across the bottom. Then take your thread and do 3 to 5 turns. This one needs a couple more wraps because it needs to be anchored better. Once you've completed that step, take the 2 pieces of chenille and lay them out of the way towards the back of the hook. Now is when we're going to tie in the legs. The legs on a stonefly are positioned about the 1/3 point from the head going back. In a second you will notice that the legs I'm tying in have knots in them. There will be a link at the end of this video to show you how to do that if you'd like to learn. With or without knots, take 3 legs and lay them almost perpendicular to the hook. Take a couple of thread wraps one way, then position them with your hands and get them the way you want, then go the other way and make X wraps over the top to position the legs how you'd like. We will go back and forth several times so that the legs won't slide. Tying all 3 in at the same time creates one simple tie-in point but also adds the friction of the rubber. This will help them so that they don't slide out. Even after your legs are tied in pretty securely, you'll want to keep wrapping around with your thread so that you can get any legs that aren't oriented correctly to be facing the way that you'd like. Take a second and orient the legs how you'd like. Once you're satisfied, move your thread up to the eye of the hook. Then take the variegated chenille and take 1 or 2 wraps behind the tan chenille. This will help create a segmented belly. Notice that the legs come off at different angles. When we get up to this point, we want to start tying through the legs, and we'll take whatever legs are facing the most rearward and work our way through them. Take your tan chenille and again pull it back to get it out of the way. Now we'll wrap through the legs, and like I said, take whatever leg appears to be facing the most rearward, then take 1 wrap between it and the other 2 pairs of legs. Then pull the next leg out, and this will be the middle leg, and take 1 wrap between it and the last remaining leg. Then, when you get to the front, make 1 final wrap, and this will be in front of the first set of legs and the eye of the hook. The beauty of this is that the legs will be positioned so that 2 are facing rearward, 2 come out about the middle, and 2 face forward. Take your thread and make a couple wraps to hold the chenille in place. We're not going to tie it off yet. Then, if you have a rotary vise, again, flip the fly upside down. If not, just look underneath and take the tan chenille and pull it across the front one last time. Give this one 3 to 5 wraps, as we will be cutting this piece off. Once you have it secured, come in with your scissors and cut as close as you can to the tie-off point. When you cut chenille, it tends to leave behind a lot of fuzz. It's very important after cutting this piece out to come in with your fingers and pull out any fibers that are still in the way, that are even connected to the core still. This will help you get a cleaner head. Take a couple of thread wraps to cover up any tan that still remains around the head. Then, take your chenille and make 1 final turn around the hook. This will give us a nice brown and black head at the front. As you can see, it gets quite cumbersome to work around all these strands of flex floss. The easiest thing to do is to come in with the other hand and pull all the legs out of the way, leaving the antenna out the front. Then tie off the chenille and come in with your scissors. Cut the chenille as close as you can and repeat the step before to get any fuzz out of the way before we whip finish. This is a rather difficult fly to whip finish, so start with your whip finisher already attached to the thread, come in with the other hand and pull everything out of the way, including the antenna. Whip finish in between the antenna and the eye of the hook. Whip finishing on top of the antenna can really mess up their orientation. These guys are bouncing right along the bottom and get pretty abused, so personally I like to give them 2 whip finishes. After applying head cement, we're going to start cutting the tails, antenna, and the legs to give everything the proper proportions. The lengths you choose for everything all comes down to personal preference. Some people like everything to be exactly how it would be on a real bug, and other people like to exaggerate the lengths on everything to give more motion. I'll give you an idea of how I like to trim mine, but don't be afraid to play around on your local waters and try different lengths to see what works best. Getting all the legs to be even can be rather tricky. I like to pull up, and when I get everything lined up, to relax the grip in my fingers so that if there's stretch in any of the legs, they relax. Otherwise, if you cut and let go, any of the legs that were stretched will be shorter than the other legs. Here are final views from the top and the bottom to give you an idea of what the finished fly looks like. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section down below. Any and all feedback is very welcomed. And if you like this video and like to see more, then don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to learn how to tie the knots in the legs to make a more realistic fly, then go ahead and click on that video in the top right corner of your screen.